What's up guys, this is Chris here. We have a pretty fun video for you guys today. I was responding to some comments, responding to some questions, and a question came up that has come up a few times. So I wanted to talk about some of the realities of red dots, particularly on rifles, but we are gonna reference them on pistols as well. I think I have enough overall knowledge in this after testing something like 20 to 30 red dots over the past 5 years. With 1,000 round review at the very least. Some of these optics that we're going to show you here have tens of thousands of rounds on them. I am lucky enough to have a job where I test and review firearms, so along with that, I can test and review optic systems as well. But I get a lot of comments on what red dot should I get? Well, so today I think we're gonna go over just a couple of realities of red dots, some of the pros and cons, and then a brief description of each one of the ones I would recommend with a price tier. Now, before we do that, I do wanna mention my page supporters. Thank you guys very much. It's because of you guys we can bring all this cool stuff to you on the channel, and you guys get to view all this content for free. It's because of those guys supporting me over on Patreon. If you like the channel and you wanna support it, that's the best way to do it. Go to the link in the description below. Also in that description is a link to a local shelter in Ames, Iowa. And finally, there'll be a link to our new channel, Outlaw Life. We're gonna see a lot of behind the scenes type stuff, but also optics reviews, gear reviews that just simply don't get enough love on the main channel. All right, first we're gonna talk about just a quick brief description of the pros of having a red dot on your rifle or your handgun. First pro is gonna be faster sight acquisition. It's gonna be easier for you to take the rifle or pistol up, shoulder it or mount it into your line of sight and acquire that dot and put it on a target. Now people are gonna disagree with that, but those people are used to iron sights. Just like me, when I was younger, I'm an old man now, grew up on iron sights only. So if you grew up on iron sights, you are taught to grab the handgun. Let's find a handgun here. This is PX4 Storm. I am going to acquire that front sight, focus on that front sight, make my plane of my vision on the target blurry, make sure that front sight is clear, and then I'm going to squeeze the trigger and make the round go off. Now the red dot, it's different, right? So when I bring up a red dot, some people are taught to do this. I've heard Lucas from TRX Arms talk about this. He's a good trainer, good shooter. Quite a few other people have talked about acquiring the dot through your front sight. So you pull your gun up, you see your front sight first, and then you dip your dot down into focus, because that's the problem with most people. Most people, when they're trying to acquire a dot, the dot's too high in the window because they're used to acquiring that front sight first. So you see this kind of thing, and then a dip down, right? That's not really where you want to be if you want to be a red dot shooter. It's kind of hard, honestly, as a reviewer, because I constantly have to go back between iron sights and red dots, and they're two different systems on how to aim a firearm. Let's be honest about that. And often everybody has both of those systems on the same gun. So there's a lot of different mentalities and a lot of different techniques. Me personally, I like the Jerry Miculek style. I like the get enough reps in, the Sage Dynamic Aaron Cowan style. Get enough reps in to where that dot just comes up right away, and there's no fucking around with the iron sights at all. Because if you have a superior optic system, why go to your inferior one first, in my opinion? I mean, iron sights are not inferior in the manner of durability and reliability. We'll get to all that in a little bit. But as far as sight acquisition, target transitions, and the ability to threat focus, and what I mean by that is, and you're afraid for your life, you are going to focus on whatever threat there's gonna be. Imagine you open the door and Jason's there with his hockey mask and his knife. You're gonna be looking at the hockey mask and the knife, and you're gonna have a really hard time front sight focusing. And if you do shoot at Jason up close, you're probably gonna do it sort of intuitively. You know, you're gonna target focus, just kind of put the sights on him and pull the trigger until he goes away. Whereas with a red dot, you are able to superimpose the dot onto the target. And then you can keep the target in focus, make sure you watch what he's doing, watch his hands, watch his eyes, because in real life you have to do all those things. Because in real life, if you are gonna use a red dot, it's not gonna be an IPSC target you're staring at. He's gonna be moving, talking, doing things with his hands, doing things with his feet. And it's good to know what they're doing while simultaneously having a sight picture. So I like a red dot for that. I like it for the faster acquisition. I like it for the threat focus. I like it for pinpoint single aim accuracy, okay? I like it for taking it out to 100 yards. I don't have to center up my iron sights, keep them topped and keep them side to side centered. With a dot, I can simply put the dot on the target, hover it over the target, and pull the trigger when it is the appropriate time to hit the target. So I like that a lot. It makes me more accurate at distance. And it also allows me to shoot longer ranges to a point, because you get to a point in long distance shooting where the iron sights are actually in your way, whereas you actually have a little bit of space underneath the dot, so you can kind of fudge it back and forth to get a little extended range, anywhere from 100 yards to 150. That helps a lot. See if we can hit them at about 120 here through the bushes. apparently. Now, another thing I like is it works better with aging eyes or astigmatism as well, and it also is going to be really good for low light or paired with a weapon light. So in both of those cases, at least for me personally, I find it's much easier to shoot with a red dot at night. I do a lot of night shooting, do flashlight testing on the channel, so I have something in the area of 10 to 12,000 rounds downrange after dark, and doing that, I like to have a red dot. So I usually pick a Beretta M9 or a gun that I like a lot that I can throw a suppressor and a red dot on and just go to the races. So pros of a red dot. The cons of a red dot are going to be that it's expensive for sure, especially for a quality one, which we'll get into here in a minute. Regardless of how expensive it is, it's always going to be added costs over the iron sights that come on your gun, right? Because your iron sights that come on your gun are free. You're going to have to buy a mount in the case of a rifle, or sometimes in the case of, let's say you buy the Glock MOS system, you might actually want to buy a better plate, like something from Agency Arms. You might have to buy an adapter plate depending on what gun and what red dot you get. You're going to have to get batteries. Not only are you going to have to get them, you're going to have to stock them up for future, but you are going to have to replace them. That's something you don't have to do with iron sights. And no matter how reliable the red dot is, which we'll get into in a minute, there are always going to be failure points, including electronics, including battery connection, including batteries dying, including losing of zero. Plates, you have a lot of interfaces with a red dot to a gun that you don't necessarily have with an iron sight. You have a lot of failure points. I'm not saying they are going to fail, but there's a lot of extra things there that could fail, and if Murphy's Law takes into place, you're going to have some problems, which personally I have, which is one of the reasons why we're making this video. Now, red dots, as we kind of skimmed over earlier, are good for advanced shooters, but they are difficult for beginners to master, simply because of, instead of a rifle, where red dots are much easier, you have a lot of points of contact. Here, let's grab this BCM for example. So I've got a lot of points of contact that are going to lead me right into the dot, right? I've got a cheek weld right here, I've got a shoulder weld, I've got my hand on the pistol grip, and I've got my hand on the vertical grip. Whereas with the handgun, you kind of have the handgun out there in the middle of space and you're trying to float it in and find that dot, right? And that's going to be a little more difficult for newer shooters, that's absolutely. But once you get used to it, it's going to be a lot easier. Now, the last thing I want to comment on, no matter what red dot you get, it's also going to be a con, is you're going to be looking at size and weight, right? The better, more durable optic that you generally get, the heavier it's going to be, and the more added weight that's going to be on your handgun, which in some cases can mess with the cycle rate of your handgun, mess with the reliability of your handgun, and in rifle cases just simply add more weight and more bulk. And sometimes they'll get so big and cumbersome, like maybe this hollow sun right here, that I mean, you're essentially adding 2 inches onto the top of the gun. So if you wanted to store this in the back of your truck, for example, or maybe underneath a seat, you might not be able to. So it adds more size, more bulk, and obviously takes up rail space as well. I think it's worth it. I think most people do, but the reality is that is a con. This is a 3.5 pound gun. With the optic on, it's more like 4. You just do add more weight. And the final thing that I did want to mention that my wife did just tell me about, I didn't even think about this because I've been in the game for a while, but they are more difficult to mount, right? You get a gun out of the box, out of the factory, it's got iron sights. They're mostly zeroed unless you buy one from Sig. And then you are going to have to open up the manual, look at the plate system, torque the screws down to the correct spec, right? Use the right screws, all that stuff. And if you've never done it before and you're not a gun person, it can be intimidating. So there are some pros and cons, right? And now we'll get really into the weeds here, and those are just the pros and cons of the basic red dot setup. Now we can get into kind of the price tiers and what you might be looking at for a red dot, and the red dot market is crazy. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of companies that make red dots, dozens of models from each company. So how do you really wrap your head around it, and how do you find the right one for you? Well, hopefully you click on this video and I give you a relatively middle of the road approach, and hopefully I kind of help you zero down what's right for you. Because everybody always says this is the best optic, but the answer is for what, right? Because Aimpoint T2 is a great optic, and we will get to that, but is it the best optic if you own 25 rifles and you want an optic on all 25? Right? Unless you've got that Jeff Bezos money, it seems like you're probably not going to have Aimpoint T2s on every single gun, or Aimpoint Acros in every single handgun. It's just a reality of the business. You know, a lot of guns don't get optics. I mean, I used to think that was a reviewer issue. I used to talk about that, but all my friends do that. All my friends bump, you know, they have 2 Trijicon SROs and they just put it on whatever gun they're running that they fancy at the time. Or they have a Comp M5 and that literally has a QD mount, so they can put it on 10 different rifles, which will talk about here in a second as well. All right, so first thing I want to go over the super cheap tier of optics, and we'll talk about some of the cheap rifle optics and some of the cheap pistol optics just real fast, because this rant's already getting crazy. So this is the Swamp Fox Raid, or I can't even spell, R.A.I.D. And this is around $100. I got this from Optics Planet. And this is a pretty decent red dot. I had this on the Wilson Combat Sig P320. We put it through a 1,000 round review, and in that process it worked relatively well until it ran out of battery. And it ran out of battery during like a 3-month test period. That is one of those optics where you're going to want to have these, and these are co-witness suppressor height night sights. The reason why you want those is because you can see them through your optic, and if your optic ever does go down, you can actually use those. The Swamp Fox Raid has some pretty clear glass, especially for a cheap optic, and it is relatively durable as far as dropping it. We have dropped it a couple times, it did not break, but we have had an issue with the battery life. And on top of that, I think with this optic at least, you do have to remove, just like the RMR, you have to remove the optic off the gun, which can be a pain in the ass, and you can strip screws in order to replace the battery. So imagine having to take your optic off every like 3 months to replace a battery. That'd be a real pain in the ass. But if you're looking for the $100 price point, that's a pretty good way to go. As far as $100 rifle optics, I would look at the Bushnell TRS-25. I mean, Nothing Fancy's got a review on that from like 12 years ago, and I bought one from that, and it's literally still running. I mean, I have to change the batteries every single year. It's a enclosed tubular sight just like the T2, but very durable, very reliable for the price point. I'd recommend it, but it does have some cons. Very small window, not nearly as durable as far as drop tests and stuff goes as something like an aim point or a hollow sun. And on top of that, you're not going to get as clear glass or as clear of a reticle. But that's one of the things you're going to sacrifice with this Swamp Fox style Bushnell TRS-25 optic, is you're not going to get near as quality of glass, electronics, build quality, or just overall across the board you're going to be lacking. Are you going to get a pretty decent gun for a range gun? Yes. That's what I would consider those things for. If you have a range toy gun that you only shoot outside, you want to have some fun, you want to turn the dot on when you go out to the range and then turn it back off, that's a good way to go. That being said, if we're looking for a serious defensive optic, I would recommend you avoid these and go straight to iron sights. Honestly, you're going to be better off practicing with the thing that's the most reliable, and these are just not reliable enough for me for something like even home defense, really. Because if I had this optic as home defense and one day my dog walked by and knocked it off the shelf and it landed on the optic, it's probably going to break, right? So I prefer something that can at least take shoulder height drops for home defense, concealed carry, and duty use. That's just my personal opinion. And for range optics, these are great, but for self-defense, we're going to go with something higher. All right, now after that, I would go up probably a level to like maybe the Sig Sauer Romeo series. Sig's got some pretty damn decent pistol optics that are good for competition, home defense, maybe not necessarily for duty or military use, but they are pretty good overall for civilian use, I think. I think they're durable and reliable enough. This one here, the Romeo 5, this is a really cheap optic coming at like $100 to $200. And honestly, we beat the crap out of these on my channel. They're lightweight, they're small, the electronics are pretty good, and overall for the price, they're a really good red dot. And I'm actually going to get a few more of these since I've had such good luck with this one and the other one that I've had, and I'm going to put them on quite a few other rifles. They look pretty slick as well. They mount up to a T2 system, and overall they're one of my favorite little budget dots. I mean, especially for guns that you don't shoot very much, this is a real good way to go. I have it in a reptilian mount, and we'll go over mounts here in a minute as well, but I like the Sig Sauer optics because they kind of run the gambit from cheap to actually pretty high quality. You can get up to their military grade stuff like their LPVOs and stuff like that, and they make overall pretty good optics, especially for the money. So I like Sig a lot, and that's a company that I would certainly go with if you're interested in the something below $300 category for rifles and pistols. Now moving up from there, and I'm going to talk about Riton optics, which is something that people go back and forth on, but this Riton optic here, which I actually forget the name of it off the top of my head, this has 3,000 rounds through it now. It comes with a lower 1/3 co-witness QD system. It actually has a similar pattern as the MRO, the Trijicon MRO, where it's got kind of a smaller window on the back and a bigger objective window on the front there. And we have off and on spots through the dials, and we have really high quality adjustments for the red dot as well. So Riton is a really, really good middle of the road optic, somewhere around $400. I would absolutely recommend these. You can see all the marks all over it because when we drop test things, I mean, we really drop test things. So we try to beat the crap out of stuff and we try to see if it keeps zero, and this one has. This is the third rifle that it's been on now, and it will be on several more before you'll see a full review, because I do not take the word review lightly on this channel. So yeah, I like this optic a lot, and for around $400, I would consider a pretty badass rifle optic. That being said, it doesn't quite have the military police track record that something like the Sig Sauer optics do, or maybe some that are a little bit higher up on this list here. But the Right and At Least rifle optics are pretty good to go for me personally. And then we're gonna go to another one of my favorites, and probably the best overall for the money, and that's gonna be the Holosun series. Holosun's not American made, they're not veteran owned or anything like Right Optics, and they're not Swiss made, but they are in fact pretty damn decent optics for the money. The Holosun 507K here, I actually have in a whole bunch of different guns, including one of my carry guns. This is one of my carry guns right here, the P365 Spectre Comp. This is the comped version of the XL. I like this gun a lot, and I like this optic the best. Probably the best micro optic, because it's almost as durable and reliable as the RMR from Trijicon, but it has a bigger window, and it's cheaper, coming in around $300 for a duty grade, durable optic for concealed carry, and I like that a lot. Not only does Holosun offer this optic, but they offer just a slew of good optics for the money. I mean, right now we're in testing with this guy, the AEMS, and it's kind of like a little miniature style Eotech slash large aimpoint acro. This comes in about $400, and usually what you're gonna see from Holosun is you're gonna see a lot of innovation, and you're gonna see really good quality for the money. But you are not gonna see as good a quality as a couple others on this list. But the reality is if you're looking for concealed carry, if you're looking for just home defense, not like military or law enforcement grade, this is a really good way to go in my opinion. And Sage Dynamics, Aaron Cowan over there does a lot of really good optic reviews, and he has a lot of super positive durability reviews of Holosun, so it's kind of hard to deny. And on top of that, I mean, this isn't the only one I have. I have the 403B, which is actually the cheap version of the aimpoint clone, and it does go into aimpoint mounts as well, which is very nice. But these are super bomb proof. You can see all the scratches and beat up thing. I've had this thing for years. It's on this ScalarWorks QD system. I just pop it off, put it on something else every single time, and over and over and over again, these work really well. Now what you're gonna get with these enclosed emitter sights as opposed to something open like an SRO, for example, is you're gonna get nothing for water, dirt, and debris to get into, but you are also gonna get, in my opinion, a little bit inferior of a sight picture, and overall a little bit more weight. So it's always gonna be pros and cons, but the durability, reliability side is for sure with the enclosed emitter optics like the 509, the aimpoint acro, and the AMS and the T1, T2 style of optics. So I like these a lot, and if I think I had to buy one optic for the rest of my life and price wasn't a factor, these would not be it. But price is always a factor, right? And since these are only $200 to $300 and you can get 2 to 3 of these for every aimpoint, the reality is I accumulate a lot of these, even more than my aimpoints, because aimpoint goes on my duty guns or my home defense guns, and these go on pretty much everything else. Primary arms, because they do sell a lot of Holosun stuff, but they are their own thing. And I did want to mention that an alternative to red dots is going to be Prism Sites. Prism Sites like ACOGs, for example, except now there's Prism Sites that have no magnification, which I think a lot of people thought was kind of a bullshit thing, but since I've been using this is a $200 primary arm Cyclops prism sight that is as durable and reliable as an aimpoint, has great battery life, has an etched reticle with BDC on it, so if you want to shoot out 500, 600, 700 yards with your non-magnified optic, you can do that. And overall, I think this will be an interesting little niche in the gun community from now on, because they keep getting smaller and smaller and lighter, and the more I shoot through this little bastard, the more I like this little thing. So for the money, this is another excellent way to go. Primary Arms also makes some of the best optics for the money. Now, going up from Holosun, I would say probably Trijicon. Trijicon is such an amazing company for me personally. One of the first optics that I ever used on an AR-15 was an ACOG. The first optic I ever bought for a rifle was an ACOG. Some of the first optics I ever bought for my handguns were RMRs. The optic that I use in competition every single time is the SRO. And as far as handgun optics go, I truly believe that Trijicon still rules. As far as open emitter handgun optics, the SRO and the RMR are by far my favorite, my personal favorite, because they just do not fail. They can fail a little bit, but for me personally, they've been really, really bomb-proof. The only issues I've ever had with the RMR is those little sketchy emitter issues because of the battery connection. But other than that, they've been absolutely durable and reliable. The downside of the RMR is you get that U window, and that increases the durability, but it also decreases your overall sight picture, makes it a little harder to shoot. The SRO is kind of like an RMR with a full window on it, meant for more competition style, bigger gun, faster transition speed sort of use. The problem is you do sacrifice a little bit of durability with these. I've seen a lot of torture tests on these, are very, very durable, don't get me wrong, but I have seen the windows pop out of these, and I have seen these crack every once in a while. That being said, I do own 10 of these, and that's never happened to me, and I beat the crap out of my gun. So is it gonna happen to you? Well, unless you're jumping out of planes, most likely not. So in my opinion, Trijicon is kind of still, especially for the money, the king of the handgun optic, but there is gonna be one that's a little bit more reliable, and that's gonna be the aim-point acro. The aim-point acro, that enclosed emitter, school bus of a thing that you put on your, that all the tactical guys put on their guns. The reality is that optic works really, really well. We're gonna have one of the new ones for the channel here shortly, and they are stupid reliable, but personally for me, I still go to the Trijicon SRO because it's durable enough for me, and on top of that, I get faster transition speed. I like the way it looks a little better, and the open emitter is more what I'm used to, and it's just easier for me to go fast, and with guns like this, I wanna go fast. Now, we'll go to the top tier here after I get done getting text messages, and we're gonna talk about what I would consider kind of the king of rifle and pistol optics. Now, one of the things I glossed over was the Eotech, just because I didn't have one here. I like the Eotech because it's very, very quick. I love their reticles, but the reality is their battery life and their durability has been a little bit sketchy over the years, especially compared to the one above all, Aimpoint. Now, if this sounds like an Aimpoint ad, well, I mean, it's kind of hard not to be. Aimpoint's never given me anything. I've never talked to them. I have no relationship with them, but the reality is they make optics that I literally cannot break even if I try. So this is the Aimpoint T2 that I keep dumping off the table here because I've got like 4 guns and optics and everything. This is the most durable optic I have ever tested, aside from maybe this one, which is the Comp M5. And the Comp M5, really the only difference between that and the T2, honestly, and there's a lot of technical differences, but the reality is one takes a more obscure CR123 battery or whatever the hell battery that is, and this one just takes AA batteries, which is way easier to get. Now, the only difference between the two of them is one is a little bit more streamlined, and this one's probably a little bit better in the zombie apocalypse, just because they'll be easier batteries to find. On top of that, I find this battery is easier to replace as well, so overall I would consider probably the Comp M5 my favorite, but honestly, both of them work really, really well. They're both stupid reliable, stupid durable. The battery life's incredible. I mean, you're talking about 5 years of battery life with the most crystal clear optic you've ever seen. Like, most of the optics that you'll see on the table have a bluish tint to them, and the more blue that they make the lens, the more battery life they can save, because the more contrast they have, the easier it is to see the dot. Whereas Aimpoint has this crystal clear glass. It has perfect durability, perfect reliability, and perfect glass quality and perfect battery life. And it's kind of boring, to be honest. Like, when you shoot an Aimpoint, it's hard to remember where the money went because you don't have any problems. And when you don't have any problems, you kind of forget there are problems until you start using other optics, right? And one of the things I've noticed with Aimpoint is that not only are they durable and reliable, but all their components are as well, right? Like, I've never had a cap break, I've never had a knob break, I've never had a mount break, I've never had a screw strip. And that's a lot of times where you'll find optics like even the Holosun, the lesser quality optics. See this little screw right here? That little sumbitch is the only thing mounting this optic to this gun, right? So when I tighten this to torque, and the first time I ever tighten it, the screw strips, and I can't get the optic back off, and the optic's on the gun forever. Well, there's ways to get that off, right? First off, I could find a replacement screw, I could drill it out, I could use a lot of different cool techniques to put stuff in there and then turn it. But the reality is that's a pain in the ass because you got a decent $400 optic and they used a -3-cent screw, you know, that they made from melted beer cans. And that kind of stuff pisses me off because if you're gonna pay $400 for an optic where it's gonna strip right away, you might as well have just paid $700 for an optic that you're never gonna have any problems with the rest of your life, and you can hand it out to your kids and he can hand it down to his kids, and eventually when they're shooting in space, your great-grandson can talk about the Aimpoint that his grandpappy bought. I mean, that's really how durable and reliable these fucking things are. The problem with that is that Aimpoint knows how good they are, and they're $700 to $1,000 per optic, which is unbelievable. I mean, because again, you're essentially paying $1,000 for a dot to just hover there for the rest of your life. And it's not anything special. It's just a red dot like all these other dots. It just stays there forever and you never have to do anything. That's really what you're paying for, and whether it's worth that to you, it decides whether or not you buy it. Wherever you fit in the tier of red dots, wherever you decide you're comfortable to buy, I really think you're gonna be happy, because the durability and reliability of the dot that you buy really depends on how much you use it and how much you wanna fuck with it. Like, if you don't mind stripping screws every once in a while, if you don't mind placing batteries every once in a while, and you're cool with that and you wanna buy a $100 optic, then great. The Swamp Fox and the Bushnell are great and they're right for you. If you want to have kind of a middle of the road optic, you don't really care about durability because you run iron sights most of the time anyway, or maybe you just have a bunch of guns you wanna put optics on, Sig Sauer and Holosun are a really freaking good way to go for that. Now, if you want to run it slick like this, you want to have a home defense gun with no iron sights on it whatsoever because your big hands get in the way and you have no place to put them, well, aim point's really the only way to go. It is what it is. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please help out your local homeless shelters. Remember to recycle. I'll check you later.